troubled by war, terrorism, weak and failed states, and civil unrest. But how did it get this way? The map of today's Middle East was mostly drawn after the First World War, the war that planted many of the seeds of conflict that still plague Israel, Palestine, Iraq, Syria, and even Iran today.
Good morning, everybody. Date is January 11th, 2026. I got to get in the habit of make sure it's 26 that I put in there. This is the first Middle East. You notice the difference in 30 minutes-ish for the new year. So with that, let's get right into this. Let me bring my co-host up on the stage, Ghost of Bass, Patrick Henry. Happy New Year, brother. I'm happy to catch up on what's going on because it seems like different parts of the world are starting to fall into the same kind of picture of things.
Yeah, man. It's pretty wild. I mean, all this stuff happening like in South America is crazy. And I was on DPH last night, Devolution Power Hour, running through what I had discovered. Seems like there's probably a continuity of government. I mean, there is a continuity of government plan. We know that they explicitly said that there's a continuity of government plan that they've initiated to keep the Maduro government intact, completely with Trump's blessing and apparently with Maduro's blessing. So that's a really, really interesting wrinkle in the whole thing.
To that point, one of the things that I guess you can consider conspiracy, kind of, sort of, was I was trying to look for all like what legal precedents do we have to go into another country and snatch up anybody, let alone the president. And there's like these very like gray ass areas where you can do it, but there's too many things that have to fall into place for that. And nothing that, at least publicly, that's been shared met any of that criteria.
Yep.
Although there was one.
What's that?
And it was, well, it's 1/2, and it's consent or cooperation with that government. And what caught my attention is, did you hear what Pam Bondi had said when they made the /arrest apprehension? She said when the units took him down, she goes, and when they took him down, she goes, and they read him his rights. That stuck out in my head because I was just like, we don't read people that's a Hollywood thing, that when we arrest people, we read them their rights. We don't. Yeah, some people will do it, just for going through the motions. But the only time it's constitutionally required, two things have to exist: integration and custody. That's the law. If you're integrating someone and you haven't read them their rights and they're in custody, well, then you lose the entire conversation. You violated their rights. So, but on the same token, if you're questioning someone and they're not in custody, you haven't violated their rights, as long as you can articulate it as a consensual, conversation. But I think if we're bombing someplace and doing something like that, voluntary consensual at that point is probably not in the case. But
yeah, well, and it's interesting because this has sparked, this whole Venezuela development has really sparked this worldwide conversation. Delcy Rodriguez, who's now she was Maduro's vice president. Rick Grinnell, Eric Prince met with her secretly in November of 2019. And then Rick Grinnell met with her brother, Jorge Rodriguez, who was the president of their National Assembly, their legislature, secretly in the latter half of 2020. And then Rick Grinnell, of course, went to Venezuela, shook Maduro's hand on January 31st, 11 days after Trump was inaugurated for his second term. Right there in the background of the picture is Jorge Rodriguez. And this is actually an interesting article that I should start with. But before we get to the article, what it sparked was Delcy Rodriguez said that this is the law of the jungle. Like what America is doing to Venezuela is the law of the jungle. Might makes right is the philosophy, which just means the strong do what thou will. The strong will do whatever they want, and the weaklings, whether you're talking about an individual strong man or a strong state or a tyrannical government, will do whatever it wants, and everyone else will just suffer the consequences of the strong. Vladimir Putin, funny enough, right before that, like a week before the whole Venezuela thing popped off, said the exact same thing. He kind of ran through the last 25 years and said, what was the justification for America bombing Yugoslavia in 1999? What was the justification for bombing Iraq in 2003? What was the justification for Georgia in 2008, for Syria in 2011? There was no justification. It was, they gave some bullshit excuse, and then they did it. And then after millions of people were killed, they kind of shrugged their shoulders and said, whoops, intelligence screwed up. It wasn't what we thought it was. Our bad. But all the damage was done, and there were no consequences. Nobody went to prison. Nobody was held accountable. And so he said, there is no such thing as international law. International law is a lie. There's no enforcement mechanism for it. Not that there should be. But it's just the strong will do what the strong want, and the weak will suffer unless the weak are strong enough to stand up to the strong. And that is the essence of peace through strength. So when Trump talks about peace through strength, really what he means, what we have all lived under for the past century, basically. I mean, everyone alive right now, anyone who's still living at this point since World War II, really since World War I, has lived under this world order where the State Department controls the world. And by that, I mean the CIA, of course, but Five Eyes, MI6, all of that. And every other country is a vassal, effectively, to some extent, of the State Department. And the vassals, they get the carrot and the stick. We will give you USAID money, right, as long as you're doing what we want you to do. And the minute you stop doing what we want you to do, we'll give you the stick, which is regime change, strategy of tension, Operation Gladio. And then if that doesn't work, then we'll just come in with our military and bomb the shit out of you and kill everybody. And that is how we, and when I say we, I'm not referring to, the good.
Yeah, no, I'm tracking.
The American people. I'm referring to the American deep state. That's how the American deep state has controlled the world. The transnational cartel has controlled the world for really probably centuries. But, in this iteration under the American empire, that's how we've controlled the world. And so Trump is now the pattern that I'm picking up on is that Trump is now really embracing that identity. This is an identity, by the way, that he has completely repudiated for the past decade. And he ran originally in 2015 and 2016, rejecting that identity and saying, we don't want that anymore. We don't want forever war. But now he's circling back and he's wearing this mask in like this really goofy kind of cartoonish wrestling soap opera. And it's inflating the hubris of all the Republicans, like the neocons, who are suddenly like, yeah, like, let's go overthrow all these governments. Let's go overthrow Cuba, Nicaragua, Colombia. Let's go do all of them. Right. And that's really unfortunate. But I think what's more unfortunate, it's not unfortunate. It's fantastic because these people are all scumbags and they're the real enemy. These are the people who serve the satanic pedophile cult and pretend that they are patriots and pretend that they're on our side, but they're anything but. But, we, MAGA, the American people, we need to understand that to some extent, we are also kind of drug addicts too. Like we are addicted to the forever wars as well, because I'm seeing, a lot of the rhetoric is like, yeah, like let's go in there and kick ass and take names America World Police, right? Like it's a Team America World Police.
America.
Yeah, and it's like
That's gonna make a comeback.
Yeah, and it's like, no, man, like that. We want to be strong and we want to kick ass when we have to kick ass. But if there is not a national security imperative, meaning that we are not being threatened imminently by a country, our military should be nowhere near that country. Like we should not be threatening to destroy them or anything like that. And I think people get confused because they're like, well, Donald Trump is saying this stuff. Well, Donald Trump says a lot of stuff. Donald Trump says stuff. And if you go back 10, 11 years, 2014, 2013, when he was criticizing all the Republicans, his biggest criticism was, these people say stuff and then they never are held accountable. Like if you're a politician, he's like, I, as a businessman, if I say the wrong thing, I can be held accountable. And, I can be held accountable legally. I can be held accountable in my business practice. I can lose business deals. I can lose friendships. But politicians lie all the time. They make promises, they never follow through, and then they're never held accountable. I think he's taking advantage of that throughout his entire presidency, where he says stuff that is blustering. A lot of it's very cartoonish. It's very provocative. He doesn't always follow through because some of it is not stuff we actually want him to do. But it triggers a response from the public that then generates a conversation that has to take place, right? last year, H1B1. We're gonna bring in 600,000 H1B1 people, right?
To that point, let me give you something, and just consider it as an extra tool for your tool belt, as you kind of like, game theory these things. Donald Trump told us exactly how he was going to operate when he was campaigning for 2016. Do you remember when he was, and I don't remember which particular when they go against the debates, there we go. And Hillary Clinton them brought up the taxes. And he's just like, he goes, no, like, you created these. He goes, yeah, I don't pay taxes on this. He goes, but it's legal. There's a loophole. He goes, and you guys won't get rid of it because your people use it too. He goes, fix it. That's all you have to do. And at the time, we're just like, oh, it was another one of those, Trump moments, right, where he got him. But what he was signaling now makes sense, hindsight, because we've learned through his entire presidency, when he says something, what does the globalist deep state, the liberals, whatever you want to call them, what do? They go the opposite direction.
Yep.
When he was talking about warp speed and the jab, you had Kamala, I'm not taking it. We're all not taking it, which is a damn good thing. We're like, good. And he's done this ever since. So early this year, when he started this presidency, and I'd posted it still on my social media, this is like late January or late February, early March, when the Epstein stuff started to come up. I told everybody, he's going to make them beg for the Epstein files. Watch, mark my words. Yep. He's going to make them beg for it. And we're there. And so when we started to get hints of an escalation happening in South America, Venezuela, and this, I said this on DEFCON, I said, how have we gone to war since World War II? And it's the authorization of use the military act, the AUMUF or whatever. Because other than that, the only way we're supposed to go to war is Congress is supposed to declare it,
which hasn't happened since 1941.
It hasn't.
Yep.
And people don't understand that every single conflict
it's been illegal, basically. I mean, it has unconstitutional, I should say. Like every war we fought since World War II has been unconstitutional. Yes.
The president has something, that he does have powers to, but it's an imminent threat. Now, remember, if we're talking, Trump, when Trump does things, it's for multiple audiences. It's for the people that read behind the curtain, behind the headlines. It's for the vast majority of the public that just reads the headlines, but it's also to the enemy. It's also
for sure
to the globalist deep state. And so what I had told Josh is I go, they're going to flip. People are going to be pissed because Trump promised us no endless wars. I go, and it's not going to be an endless war. He showed us that already with the Houthis, and he showed us that with Iran, which is a whole nother point I'll make. I go, but what he's going to do, I go, Josh, he's going to make them secure it in law that there is no way a president can circumvent the system of doing any type of military conflict without Congress approving the war. And it just passed the Senate, and it's on its way to the House right now, that very law. And everybody's saying he's going to veto it when it gets to him. He's not.
I don't think he is either. I think you're right. I think that's brilliant. I think you're absolutely right that he's for. And there was a Russian analyst. I read part of his article on DPH last night, where he said, for all the irony here is, for all of Trump's like charisma and his like cartoon character that he actually is bringing this conversation to the very surface. And now everyone's talking about how unnecessary wars actually are, how abnormal it is to like the human condition. Like, even though human nature is like disagreement and conflict, the idea of like millions of people dying in a conflict,
it pushes tribalism globally.
Yes, exactly.
And the deep state, we always think of it in terms of America. If America's split, well, then they keep power. And yes, that's true. But that same thing, that concept applies globally. The deep state doesn't just control one country. They control multiple factions. And if the whole world thinks we're all enemies of each other, then humanity never unites to take on the globalists. They win. And he's doing it. And here's the last point that I'll make. The other thing that he's shown is, why in the world have we had 15, 20-year wars when he dealt with the Houthis in 48 hours? He dealt with Iran in 18 hours. And he dealt with Venezuela in under 6 hours. He's showing everybody that you can go make your move, be done, and not lose one American life, and not have to have something that costs trillions of dollars, and the military industrial complex didn't make any money. And so he's going to start he's going to start creating that expectation that if we do something, we've already shown we can do it quick. So anyways,
that's a good point. That's a good point. Yeah. Yeah. And you know, like, again, first principles are so important because we have to be principled, and we've had principles for many years. It's very easy when the opposition is in power for us to criticize the opposition and say, well, here are all the things you shouldn't be doing, right? You shouldn't be starting conflicts. You shouldn't be throwing money, bad money after good money after bad money, right? You shouldn't be investing in foreign wars. You shouldn't be doing regime change. But then when we're in power, it's like people seem to all of a sudden just memory wipe, and they're like, well, wait a minute, it's the Donald Trump government, so every single person in this government must be an angel, and these are all white hats, and it's the white hat government. No, like, were you paying attention during the first Trump administration? Did you see what they did to like undermine him and stop him from, like, who stopped the funding of the border wall during the first term? It was the Republican Party. That's who stopped the funding. Okay, it was Paul Ryan and John McCain. They stopped the funding. The first 2 years Trump was in office, he had full control of Congress. He could have funded everything and literally saved America in the first 24 months in office. But it was the Republicans who stonewalled him and refused to. Do you remember John McCain casting the final vote at midnight to block the abolishment of Obamacare? It was John McCain who voted to stop Obamacare. By the way, his friends are still controlling the Republican Party. Hate to tell you, but you know, his friends are still controlling the Republican Party. Lindsey Graham, Tom Cotton, Rick, whatever his name is. They're all out there. So it is what it is. But you know, getting back to Venezuela, I want to run through this article real quick. We don't have to read the whole thing. I just want to point out a few key elements of it. It's important because I think people just assume that every villain that we see around the world are all just CIA puppets, like the Ayatollah being one of them. The Ayatollah was 100% installed by MI6. Like, that is a fact. He was flown. He was living in Paris in 1978. Literally, they flew him in during as the revolution started. CNN interviewed him on the plane, and he was doing an interview with television. They're like, "What does it feel like to now be the leader of a country?" Right? And then we sold him all the weapons that he used to go fight Iraq in the 1980s. I mean, this is very, very easy to understand if you actually go back and just look at the data. So yeah, the idea of deposing like a guy who was installed by MI6, 100% get that. The question is, was Nicolas Maduro installed by the CIA? And after having gone back and looked through it, I'm actually going to do tomorrow night on the Book of Trump. I'm going to do Hugo Chavez, who was the predecessor to Maduro. Maduro was like one of his top, lieutenants. Hugo Chavez wasn't installed by the CIA. Hugo Chavez opposed the CIA, as did Nicolas Maduro. Both George Bush and Barack Obama were anti-Chavez and anti-Maduro. And that should tell you something, that when both parties are saying this guy is Satan, your siren should be going off. Look at Kim Jong-un, right? Kim Jong-un was the most evil man in the world until Donald Trump walked across the DMZ, and now he's one of Trump's buddies. So Putin too. I mean, Putin would also fall into that. So this is an article from the Miami Herald. I've covered this on a few shows. We did it on DPH last night, so we don't need to run through the whole thing.
Oh, I'm glad you're bringing this up, because I caught a little bit of this conversation you and John were having in the chat. So. Yeah.
So the title of it is from October. It says the title is "Exclusive Venezuelan Leaders Offered U.S. a Path to Stay in Power Without Maduro." And this is a picture from January 31st, 11 days after Trump was inaugurated. The guy in the back is Jorge Rodriguez. That's the brother of Delcy Rodriguez, the current president, now the president of Venezuela. And Rick Grenell went there to bring back these 6 Americans who were detained by Maduro. And Maduro, the allegation being that they all were CIA assets who were there to overthrow the Venezuelan government. And there were multiple iterations of guys being arrested, Americans being arrested and accused of trying to overthrow the Venezuelan government over the past 5 years. The most famous being in May of 2020, the Bay of Piglets. Those Green Berets were sent back during the Biden administration. They're now being prosecuted by the Trump DOJ for trying to overthrow the Venezuelan government. And so let me archive this. But this is hold on, copy, archive. The reason that this is relevant to the Middle East is because what this article details is it details the fact that Rick Grenell met in secret with Jorge Jorge Rodriguez back in late 2020, after he was the DNI. He didn't tell the State Department he was going to this meeting in Mexico City. He didn't tell the National Security Council. He didn't even tell the special representative to Venezuela that Trump had created and appointed, Elliot Abrams. Elliot Abrams said, I had no idea he was there, no idea what they talked about. Eric Prince, a year before, November 2019, went and met with Delcy Rodriguez in secret to negotiate the release of these oil executives who have been arrested by Maduro. And even Bloomberg at the time was speculating, when they found out about the meeting, that this was Trump trying to set up a back channel with Maduro. But what this article explains is that Qatar, there's the Middle East connection. They were actually working with Maduro for, I guess, a few years now, but specifically ever since Trump came back. And they brought a proposal in April to Rick Grenell. Rick Grenell then presented it to Trump. The proposal was for a continuity of government situation where the Maduro government would remain intact and Nicolas Maduro would basically surrender himself. That proposal was initially rejected by Trump. And then in September, they came back a second time with a revised proposal and gave it to Grenell. And then Grenell went and presented it to Trump. And it doesn't specify whether it was accepted or anything, but that's what this article is. This article is from October, and they're saying, hey, this revised proposal from Doha, from Tamim. I went and checked the Qatar foreign ministry. There were meetings between Maduro, Delcy Rodriguez, the Qatari government in both April, July, and September. So that, like, all this tracks everything. Like, I've checked out what they're talking about with these meetings, and these meetings all absolutely happened.
Well, that's fascinating, because if this is true, and I believe it is, that satisfies. Remember, I said if you have government cooperation or consent, you don't have to have both. You have to have just one of those. In this case, you would have both. You would have the cooperation of the government and consent. Yeah. This would be that legal pathway that we all kind of been like, how did he do it? Yeah.
And so here is Nicolas Maduro's son, adult son, at a rally a few days ago. I think this was either yesterday or the day before yesterday. And I'm going to read what he's saying because this is in Spanish, but he says, "And let there be no doubt, I'm telling you, everything that is happening, everything we are doing today as a government was Nicolas Maduro's plan, personally approved by him. We are following his instructions. He set the course, and he was prepared for everything. If something happens to me, here is the path, and all of you know what you have to do. Here is the plan for the homeland. Here is the plan for the 7 transformations. Here is the negotiation plan approved by him. The 5 points that the president approved in December are what we are working on today, and the prosperity that the country will achieve is the plan the president approved. We are following his instructions, and with our elder sister, Delcy Rodriguez, leading as acting president, and the collective high-level political leadership team, collective direction, as he always told us." So he is telling you that this is a continuity of government plan. There are other videos that I could play, but we would spend the next 15 minutes watching them. But right before she was sworn in, Delcy Rodriguez, the secretary for the National Assembly, for their legislature, held a big press conference. All the military generals were there. All the government leaders were there. And she said, under the Constitution, we have enacted a continuity of government plan. It has been approved by the Supreme Tribunal of Justice, which is their Supreme Court. Yeah. It has been, it's in accordance with the laws laid out by the legislature. So all branches of government are in agreement. This is happening. And this is to ensure that the continuity of the current government, not a new government, the current government remains intact. And so Delcy Rodriguez was immediately sworn in. She then sits there and she holds up a red folder and she says, "Here is the continuity of government plan, the devolution plan that signed by Maduro, who is still our president." She said, "He is still the president. I'm merely just keeping the seat warm for him." And yeah, so I mean that's the affirmation right there. And if you go back to the sanctions that Trump put onto Venezuela, he sanctioned Maduro in November 2017. He then turns around and sanctions 4 people in 2018. The 4 people are Celia Flores, Maduro's wife, Delcy Rodriguez, who's now president, Jorge Rodriguez, the guy I just showed you, the president of the legislature, her brother, and Vladimir Padrino, who is the defense minister, who's still the defense minister. The three people now running the Venezuelan government are Delcy Rodriguez, Jorge Rodriguez, and Vladimir Padrino. Those are the three people now running the Venezuelan government. And those are the three people of the four who were sanctioned by Trump and kicked this whole thing off in 2018. So it's very clear to me that Trump and Maduro have been working together since 2017.
Well, first, before I forget, you got to send me these links, because I think this confirms my theory. On exactly that. So when you have, please send me all that, and then I'll actually put this theory down on paper for people to share.
So here is the same guy, Nicolas Maduro's son, a week ago at a different rally. And there have been I mean, this situation, Alpha, has turned Nicolas Maduro into a cult icon. He is like a cult figure now, because he now symbolizes the opposition to imperialism. So there are massive rallies all over Venezuela now in support of him, where people are looking to him as their leader. Meanwhile, we've been told by the MSM for years now that nobody in Venezuela supports him. That's just not true at all. And so here's his son at a rally a week ago. He says they are expecting a civil war. They still say it. Will they achieve it? And everyone says no. He says, will they divide us? Everyone says no. And I want to point out, let me go back here. I want to point out that when Delcy Rodriguez is being sworn in, that's Nicolas Maduro's son holding the Bible for her. So she's being sworn in by Nicolas Maduro's son, who says this is a continuity of government plan, and we're doing exactly what my dad told us we needed to do. So pivoting to this, here is from the day before that rally. A rally was held in Colombia by the Colombian president. Okay, and this is the guy that you remember Trump said he better watch his ass. He's the head of the cartel. Not true at all. This guy, Gustavo Petro, has been bombing the cartels and arresting them for the past 3 years. Listen to what he says here. I'm going to read this because this is in Spanish again. He says, a clan of pedophiles wants to destroy democracy in Colombia. Harsh, yes, but that's the reality. And to keep the list from coming out, they send warships to kill fishermen from this city and threaten the neighbor, talking about dictator and so on. And as if the people of Colombia would applaud an invasion of their brother, which is not the president, but the people of Venezuela. When would we ever be so treacherous and sold out, betraying our own blood, or the people of Panama, or the people of Venezuela? They are our own people. So they want the president to do what that coward Ivan Duque wanted to do. Ivan Duque was the president before Gustavo Petro. I'll get to him in a second. Wanted to do, to lend Colombia's land so that from there they could invade a brother country that shares the same history as us. Because Bolivar was born there and came to die here in the city. Bolivar is the George Washington that liberated all these countries from Spanish rule in the 1800s. It cannot be. A president of Colombia that would do that would be cursed by future generations, because you would never be forgotten as a traitor. I do not belong to those who wanted to kill Bolivar. The government of Venezuela has made many criticisms, but I do not mock the people of Venezuela. Nor would I set a trap for the people of Venezuela to fall into the trap of an invasion that is only about their oil, driven by greed and violence, to turn this beautiful corner of South America into another Syria, another Iraq, another Libya full of slaves, slave trading and new forms of slavery. Epstein's list, his friends, those who don't want the United States, that list to be published in the United States. They want to use us here with violence so that the people of the United States don't think about their own government, but instead get consumed by xenophobia, racism, ideals of racial superiority, and other false beliefs. So he's saying that kind of stuff, and they use us to avoid addressing their own problems. He's talking about the Epstein list. The president of Colombia has spent decades denouncing drug traffickers, and the drug traffickers he has denounced have always been the ruling elite in Colombia. So he's talking about himself. They've been ruling the state. So it's important.
Real quick on that, you know, and this fascinating. And I remember when you first teed us off onto the work that this guy's been doing, that's been good. And hold on, I got to make sure I put your thing so people know where to find you. So here, this is just brilliant as I'm looking. If we know the deep state has people implanted in all the governments around the world, you know, they do. That's including our own. That's the way they operate.
Yep.
So these guys now, whether they've been on Trump's, I won't say Trump's team, but we'll say the White Hats team or the good guys team from the very beginning, or whether at some point they were captured by the White Hats, that's a different argument. What I'll say is I firmly believe that Maduro and Petrov are people that are controlled by the White Hats. They're controlled by the good guys. I'm convinced of that. Now, here's the thing. If the deep state knows that, if you had to overthrow them because you know that they're cooperating with the good guys, well, to overthrow them, they would have to have different messaging. And the different messaging to what these guys are saying right now would be a message that's aligned with President Trump. And so if you try to overthrow, whether it was Maduro or if you were trying to overthrow Gustavo here, the people would be like, so we are aligned with the US? The deep state loses that narrative too. So by these guys holding the line of America's the tyrant, Trump's the one pushing tyranny, I'm trying to protect the freedom of the people, how can anybody go, if they're taken down, they're going to be looked at as a martyr. And whoever tries to take them over, the people would do a revolution anyways, because they were like, no, this was a guy that was fighting for us. So you lose that argument. In the same breath, Trump gets to use these guys by proxy to get out the truth. It is. We know that there is an elite set of people that don't want Epstein disclosed. And this conversation gets to come out into the forefront. Now, with that, I do think that Petrov is going to get snatched up by Trump, but not because he's a bad guy. It's the same thing as with Maduro. You also got to protect these guys.
Well, that's ultimately why I think I think that's why Maduro probably was snatched up, is to protect him, because I think he's a cooperating witness, entering witness protection. The fact that his wife was snatched up too.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, like they accuse her of being a part of the cartel.
I'll send you my post from November 29th, where I described exactly how it was going to go down and how they were going to use them to the last second. And I said, and they're either going to go over there and snatch him up, or it's going to be like, oh, he's dead. I go, but you're going to see. And this is what I'll say in the very same post. I said, immediately following his apprehension or his death, you're going to see an accelerated conversation on the 2020 election. And all that shit happened because it's not because I'm a fortune teller. It's just the patterns were there. But here's what I will say is going to happen before anything happens in Colombia. And here's the thing, for those that are new to the show, this is not me saying it hindsight. I said all this stuff before Trump made the remarks. I had said after Venezuela, Trump will hit Mexico. He'll do strategic attacks on the cartel in Mexico. And here's why it has to happen before Colombia. Is if you look at it from a military strategy, you know, this is the same argument I said. If the IDF was really trying to push out Hamas, this is the plan you would do. You would put a portion of the IDF north of Gaza. You would put a portion of the IDF between Gaza and Egypt, and then you would split it down the middle, and you would have two units in the IDF in the middle of Gaza, one to work south, one to work north. Because what you do is you decouple them, you destroy the logistics, and that's how you would actually flush them out. That's the safest way to do it. Well, that concept doesn't change here. And what was one of the first things that Trump did when he took presidency? He shut down the border, and we had the largest presence of U.S. military at the southern border. That's covering us on the bottom. Then he makes deals with Argentina for meat, and he goes after Venezuela. That puts us at the south end. But what happened in before those? He hit the middle. He took control of the Panama Canal. He decoupled these people between being able to go, you know, back and forth with each other without having any type of eyes on surveillance or recon by us. And so now what you'll see if he goes and he starts to attack Mexico next, which I think he is, and I'm talking attack like the cartels, not like the people or the country, just the cartels. Well, you can't have anyone from South America that's still controlled by the deep state come in because they're cut off. They can't get there. The waters are controlled and the land routes controlled. Then at that point, he'll get to go and it'll look like we snatched up Gustavo and all that, but he'll be able to help them finish that up. I think it's a brilliant strategy what's going on if it is happening the way I think.
Yeah, well, I 100% agree with you that I think the real target here is Mexico. I think Mexico is at, and by the way, Gustavo Petro held a press conference a year ago where he said the real cartel, the head of it all, even the cartels operating down in Bolivar in northern South America, Colombia and Venezuela, are all run by Sinaloa. They're all run by the Mexican cartels. So he said Mexico is actually the origin of it. But to that point, here is my show from October 7th. So just take a listen to this. Now they're talking about doing a land-based invasion into Venezuela. I wonder if we're going to see Maduro get arrested, extracted, taken back to the U.S. Maybe like General Flynn said, you should willfully surrender before it's too late. Maybe Maduro will willfully surrender. I'm sorry. Take me away. Take me away. No. Please take me away. Take me away. No. And then the U.S. military moves in. Now they're talking. So none of this is a surprise to me. Like, this is literally, I like play by play thought this is exactly what we were going to see happen. And so to that point, Gustavo Petro, by the way, like Trump has already like finished that storyline. He's visiting the White House the first week of February. So he's now coming to the White House to meet with Trump. So there's not going to be an extraction of Gustavo Petro. Trump has already poured water on that fire, and that narrative is now fizzled out. And so Gustavo Petro has put out posts about it. Trump's put out multiple posts about it, being like, Gustavo Petro called me and we had this long conversation and it was very, very heartfelt. And now I understand the real dynamic of the cartel operating in Colombia. And now he's going to come to Washington and we're going to have a fantastic sit down at the White House the first week of February. So and Gustavo Petro gave an interview to CBS where he said, we spoke for 55 minutes and I spoke for 45 of the 55 minutes and Trump listened to every word I said. And it was very heartfelt and we really connected. It was a heart to heart.
Did he use those numbers?
Understands now what's happening.
Did he use those numbers 45 and 55?
Yeah, he did. He said he spoke for 45 of the 55 minutes.
That's important because, 55 for those that follow boards, it loud and clear message received, we hear you 5 by 5.
Yeah.
And if he's saying, hey, look so if you use the number 45 and 55, it's, hey, for those of you that are paying attention, here's Trump's message loud and clear received. Here we are. We got it. So yeah, you got to send me that one too, bro.
but going back to what Gustavo Petro said about the civil war and Nicolas Maduro's son said they are expecting a civil war. Gustavo Petro said Ivan Duque. So Ivan Duque was the president. He's like a regime, CIA controlled, State Department controlled puppet who was the president of Colombia until he was deposed by Petro. Petro won the election and became president in 2022, and then immediately started going after the cartels and bombing them, arresting them, and they were negotiating in Qatar the surrender of the Gulf Clan cartel, the largest cocaine cartel in Colombia, negotiated surrender in September in Qatar back 3 months ago. Ivan Duque was anti-Maduro. He was anti-Venezuela. All the rhetoric out there about how evil Maduro is, how he needs to be overthrown. He's been on Fox News and CBS and CNN for months now, talking about how everything Trump's talking about doing is the right thing and Trump is the righteous actor, all that stuff. And what Petro accused Ivan Duque of doing was lending land to the deep state to launch a ground invasion of Venezuela and start a civil war, right? That is exactly what happened in Syria in 2011. Turkey, NATO, which is NATO, lent land for arms to be walked into Syria. They were given to rebels, and then they pointed at Assad and said, go overthrow him. And they gave him all bags of money, and they said, and those rebels became known as ISIS, right? We created ISIS. ISIS is a U.S. creation. It is a contractor for the State Department. That is a known fact for people who actually follow this stuff. Just like Al-Qaeda was a contractor for the CIA. ISIS is a contractor for the CIA. We created ISIS, as did the Mossad and CIA together. So That's exactly the model, is a civil war. The only way you can depose a popular president who actually has the support of the people, which Assad had and Maduro had, is to start a civil war. By the way, look at what they're trying to do to Trump right now. They're trying to start a civil war in America. Same thing they did in the summer of 2020, right? It's the only way to get a guy who's popular out of office is to start a civil war. So that's the model. And I'll bring it full circle here back to the Middle East, because we have this interview. Everyone loves this guy, Milei. I've been very skeptical of Milei this whole time. I'm very skeptical of what he is. And here's why. Argentina was the #1 debtor to the IMF. Milei might be a good guy. I don't know. But, Milei, Argentina was the #1 debtor to the IMF. The IMF is the World Bank that runs all the countries borrow money from the IDF or from the IMF. They go into debt to the IMF. Then the IMF comes in and requisitions assets, overthrows governments. They're like the Iron Bank from Game of Thrones, basically, right? So the year before Milei comes into power, he comes literally out of nowhere. The legislature in Argentina, the inflation there was so out of control. I mean, it was like a communist country, that they passed a law basically forgiving all personal taxes for 1 year. So for 1 year, nobody had to pay taxes, which means the IMF's debt was not serviced that year. And then all of a sudden, Milei comes in and he talks about abolishing all these agencies. He actually didn't abolish very many agencies. He took 60 of the agencies, and instead of abolishing them, he privatized them, and he sold them off to the highest bidder. And I went and I asked ChatGPT, analyze all of this. Are these actually payments to the IMF? And I think 4 days ago, there was an article published about how 6 banks are now coming in to negotiate with Argentina to do a $3 billion payoff. And I said, is this the IMF coming in to collect? And it said, yes, this is the IMF coming in to collect. The IMF, basically, he privatized the government so that the bankers, the world central bankers, could come in and buy everything up. You'll own nothing and you'll be happy. So instead of the government bureaucracy controlling everything, now the transnational bankers will control everything in Argentina. By the way, what did Milei do in December 2023, right after he came into office? He pulled out of BRICS. He basically cut off ties with, negotiations with the Sovereign Alliance, Xi and Putin and all them. And he pivoted back into the orbit of the deep state, right? So here he is doing an interview the other day, and he's asked, and he offers this up. He says,
Si no tenía
well, I don't even need to play it because it's all in Spanish, but he says, if Trump asks, we will help invade Venezuela. And the interviewer asks, did he ask you to do that? And Milei said no. So he's just offering. He's like, hey, if you want, you can use Argentina as a staging ground to start a land war with Venezuela. We're more than happy to help. And the guy's like, well, did Trump even ask you to do that? No, Trump didn't ask me, but if you want, we'll do it. I'm very skeptical about Milei. And if you notice when that one time that Trump came, that he was with Trump, he was hanging all over Trump, and Trump was kind of stiff arming him. I don't know. There was some body language stuff there happening where I don't think Milei is what people think he is. He could be, but I'm just very, very skeptical. And then you look at this whole Isaac Accords thing. So for those who don't know,
before you get to the Isaac Accords, let me just bring a little humor here. I'm glad you brought actual research and science to why he's been on your radar, because the reason he's been on my radar has been much more juvenile, but it still matters, man. You're not gonna be able to unsee this. Okay. Listen, dude.
Oh my God.
Yeah. The first time I saw this guy, I was like, you want to shag, baby.
Such a good call. Such a good call.
I was like, bro, come on. It's like,
well, it's very cartoonish, the whole chainsaw thing, and he's like, fuego, 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 fuego. Yes, and I went and I asked all the AI things. I said, did he actually abolish that many agencies? And it said, no, he actually didn't. He did get rid of the really superfluous stuff, like the LGBTQ stuff, but then everything else he just privatized and sold off to the highest bidder. He put it up for auction and sold off to the highest bidder, and the people who ended up buying it were all people who have ties to the World Economic Forum and the banks and all that. So that's not, maybe that's the only way out of communism for Argentina. I don't know, but it's very dubious, I think. And then you go look at the Isaac Accords. The Isaac Accords, it's very sketchy. For those who don't know what the Isaac Accords are, late last year, within the past, I think it was 6 months ago, September, I believe, Malay and Netanyahu signed what's called the Isaac Accords, and that was basically, it was to bring the idea is to bring Latin America and Israel together in this like alliance. I believe Bolivia has now joined it, and the idea is to get every single country in South America to join the Isaac Accords. Okay, and for those who don't know the history here, I see there's a few posts that talk about this, but from my own research into the history of Zionism, back in like the late 1800s, before they even got to talking about Palestine or anything like that, these Jewish settlers from Eastern Europe, funded by a British Jewish aristocrat, bought up a bunch of land in Argentina and started like some townships in Argentina. And the idea at the very first World Jewish Congress in the late 1890s was, the proposal was, let's just go to Argentina. That can be Israel. And that was actually very seriously considered. But a lot of the hardliners stood up and said, and one of those hardliners, by the way, was Netanyahu's own grandfather. His name was Milakowski. And if you look at the spelling, you take off Kowski and it's Malay. And so there's conspiracy theories out there that Malay and that Malay's real name is Milakowski. And, Netanyahu's father, his grandfather's name was Nathan Milakowski, Natan Milakowski. And his father called himself Netanyahu, like would write articles, and he would sign his articles Netanyahu, which means the son of Natan. And so then he legally changed his name eventually. This is Netanyahu's father, to Netanyahu, which means the son of Natan. His father's name was Nathan. And that's why his name is Netanyahu and not Milakowski, but his real name is Milakowski. That was his grandfather's name. So anyway,
interesting.
Yeah, it's crazy, dude. It's crazy. I don't know if that's real or not, but the spelling is real. The Milakowski thing is absolutely real. I don't know if they're actually related. That's just a conspiracy theory. But a lot of these politicians in the Western Hemisphere have dropped, and famous celebrities and stuff have dropped the Kowski off of their name because they're Jewish, because it makes their name sound less Jewish. There's a lot of people in Hollywood have done that. They drop the Kowski and they just keep the first half, and whatever. So anyway, I'm sure some of the people in the audience have noticed this, but there are some pretty crazy things happening in Patagonia right now. A lot of forest fires that are happening, and it all goes back to this press conference. So you remember a few days ago, Trump signed that executive order where he published about it, where he posted about it, where he said, I am prohibiting by executive order any transnational corporation from buying single family homes like BlackRock, right? Because they're buying up all the single family homes in America. They're artificially driving up the cost of living. That's dumb. It's not going to happen anymore.
To quote him, he goes, corporations don't live in family homes.
Yeah. So Malays actually just did the opposite. And I went and checked with ChatGPT. I said, was this done by like the legislature, or was this done by executive order? And it said, no, this was done by executive order. Executive order. Malay, there was a law in Argentina saying transnational corporations and banks could not own private property in Argentina. And by executive order, which is now being challenged in the Supreme Court by the legislature, Malay is saying, no, y'all can come in and buy stuff. Come in and buy up all the land you want. Like we want your investment. We want this is all being done under like the false binary of communism and capitalism, as if, one is evil and one is pure. But, if you go too far into capitalism, you end up in what is known as crony capitalism, mercantilism, where basically a bunch of oligarchs just own everything. And it's essentially the same thing as communism. It just has the veneer of capitalism, of a free market. But, go out there and try to start an airline this weekend and see what happens. You can't start an airline, even if you had $10 billion in capital and a fleet of planes at your disposal. The FAA would never allow you to start an airline because you're not part of the club, right? That's how the American economy actually works. We are very much a socialist economy. So here is Malay's press secretary talking about this. He says, regarding rural lands, the purchase by foreign private individuals is now allowed. The prohibition on changing the productive use of farmland for 30 to 60 years after a fire is also removed regarding rural lands. So what they're saying is that there used to be a law saying that when there's a forest fire that burns farmland, you're not allowed to change the use of the land. The land still has to be agriculture. And I think the idea was to prevent, arson and sabotage from, driving farmers off their land, buying their land up, and then converting, and then developing it into something else, which is a tactic that, unscrupulous developers are going to use to get people off their land. We allegations of people doing that in North Carolina and other places around the United States, Hawaii, right? So that just happened. That was like last month. I think that was sometime in December that occurred. December 9th, Milei announces this. So that press secretary statement was from December 9th. Now all of a sudden you have these fires that are all over the place in Patagonia, right here. Okay. And we now have, there's a guy, Salgado, who's been doing some pretty good. Let me see if I can find his report. Multiple IDF soldiers now, it sounds like, have been arrested. There have been all these videos of people like this guy right here, of like Israeli soldiers. Israeli soldiers like in the forest of Patagonia, starting these fires. Like this guy in this video is crying because he's sitting there pleading with this guy. Don't go start a fire. He says 1 hour you leave there. Please over there, the tent over there, the other side of the tent. Don't go start this fire. No fire can be made in the forest. Prohibited. Do not start a fire in the forest. And this guy who's an Israeli is like, yeah, whatever, dude, whatever. And he's walking down there to start a fire. Okay. And this guy.
How did we figure out he's an Israeli? I'm curious because I know that's a question that'll be brought up.
So this is being like reported all over Argentina. You have people who are saying that that there are these groups of Israelis who speak Hebrew, who I guess they're identified by their Israeli passport. Here is another report of somebody being arrested because a grenade was found. And the grenade was an M26 IM, which is manufactured in Israel. And that was the grenade that started this forest fire. And so 2 Israelis were caught setting up the fires. They were arrested according to this report, right? Here's another report. Let's see. We have this woman right here.
El alma del corazón cuando ves a la gente que se quedó sin nada, cuando ves los animales muertos. Nosotros hacemos colecta, pero lo que más te duele es el alma.
What hurts the most? What hurts the most in your heart and soul is when you see the dead animals. We are raising funds. I can't even talk about the anguish we feel. We live here. This place is paradise for us, and they burned our paradise, man. They left us. They ruined everything, and what's happening here. And they're trying to sell Patagonia to all the Jews. This has been known for a long time. Everyone here knows that this place is crawling with Israelis. They're buying all the land, and the only people, it says, no one does anything. The only people stepping up are the ones who lost everything here. They left us alone. Talking about the government. So as of right now, 80,000 acres of forest in Patagonia, which is, highly sought after land for people who like for outdoorsmen or people who like to camp and hike. I know many people have gone down there for backpacking trips. 80,000 acres of forest have been burned. And apparently a lot of these fires are being started by arsonists. Recently in latter 2025, there was a survey that was conducted, like a geological survey. And what the survey allegedly found, this is what one researcher found. I grabbed their stuff. It found that Argentina, that's where Patagonia is, southern South America, is loaded with rare earth minerals, cobalt, lithium, a number of other stuff. I have the surveys right here if I can get this thing to load. But the point is that there's riches in the ground that was just discovered, like just released in a survey last year. And now all of a sudden you have these Israelis that are down there burning everything up. Here are the maps. So from this report that was released, you have cobalt. All the blue is cobalt. You have 5,000 tons of cobalt. You have estimated 75 tons of copper. You have 500 tons of chromium, and then 500 tons of other rare earth minerals. And these are the areas that are now burning, right? And so the idea, I think, or the allegation is that these places are set on fire, and then the people are driven out, and then somebody comes in, an investor comes in, buys up the land, converts them into mines. Because remember, the old law in Argentina was that this old land zoned for agriculture cannot be used for anything else. You can't use it for mining. You can't use it for housing or development or anything for 30 to 60 years is the time period after a fire.
This sounds
Now,
so like Lahaina and Malibu.
Yeah. And then look at this one. This is Australia. Look at this survey that was released. This is all the rare earth minerals that are located in around Melbourne in Australia. And here are arson fires that were started. And you look at where the rare earth minerals are, and then you look at where the fires are, and it's like identical. It's like the exact same spots where the fires are is where the rare earth is. And so, what these other people, there's a guy Salgado out there, if you want to go look him up on X, who's been doing some good reporting on this. The people that are being interviewed are saying that this one guy, he's a like a whitewater rapids guide, right? And he said that he came across this group of campers who were all Israeli. They were all speaking Hebrew, and they vanished. They were gone. And so he went looking for them, and he found them posted up in this really remote spot that you could like only access by boat. And he said they had all this radio equipment set up. They had a big satellite phone, and they seemed to be communicating with somebody. And then all of a sudden, when he pulled up and said hello to them, they just started panicking and packing everything up and like speaking in Hebrew. And so the allegation from all these people in Patagonia is that these are all IDF soldiers. These are all people who work for the Israeli military, and they're doing this as part of like an operation to acquire land in Argentina. For what purpose, I don't know, but that's the allegation. Whether or not it's true remains to be seen, but the evidence is certainly compelling. And then when you go back a month to the attacks that occurred in Australia, and remember that weekend where we had like 3 different attacks, Brown University, Australia, all that. What Netanyahu came out and said is he said, anywhere where there is a Jewish person, regardless of whether or not they have Israeli citizenship, we, Israel, have jurisdiction to come in there and protect those people. So if you're not going to protect those people, if their government's not going to protect them, we're going to protect them. We'll send them whatever we have to send in to protect them. So we're going to claim jurisdiction everywhere in the world where there are Jewish people, which of course is ridiculous and totally illegal and totally immoral, but it's globalism. I mean, that is the essence of tyranny. It's the essence of globalism. And the justification is, of course, social justice. We're going to protect this identity, racism, xenophobia, anti-Semitism, whatever it is. We're going to protect this identity group from hatred because you're not protecting them. That's what Netanyahu said. And that ultimately may be what the justification is here in Argentina. But it's just very interesting that you have this conflict in South America that's happening. Maduro and Gustavo Petro are the 2 most anti-Israel, like vocal anti-Israel leaders in the world. For Maduro, it's not even close. He's like number 1. And before him, it was Hugo Chavez. Hugo Chavez 20 years ago was, pro-Palestine, anti-Israel. When Delcy Rodriguez was sworn in, you couldn't see it right there, but she was sworn in on the sarcophagus of Hugo Chavez. And behind the sarcophagus, it's like this giant building, this big monument in Caracas. Is a Venezuelan flag and a Palestine flag because Hugo Chavez was that pro-Palestine. So, all the Zionists, all the people who are pro-Israel are the ones who are celebrating the overthrow of Nicolas Maduro. They're the ones who've been calling for war against Venezuela. None of this seems like a coincidence to me. And then you look at Iran, like that whole situation seems a little silly to me as well, because Pezeshkian, who's the new president, is moderate. He's moved Iran, like their politics, away from the religious stuff. The Ayatollah and the IRGC, that's a whole different element of like their government. Pezeshkian, who's the president and the prime minister and the foreign minister, that's outside of that like religious theocracy. So, deposing the theocracy that was installed by the MI6, I mean, that makes sense to me. But should we be militarily intervening in a country that hasn't waged war against us and hasn't even really waged war against Israel? I mean, even if you are somebody who's sympathetic to Israel and thinks that we need to protect Israel, Iran has had every reason to bomb Israel over the past, year or two, and hasn't. They had every opportunity to send to blanket Israel in hypersonic missiles, destroy their water infrastructure, destroy their electrical infrastructure, and they chose not to. And I think that that's a sign to me that they're not quite as crazy or radical as we are told they are. And even if the Ayatollah wanted to bomb Israel, and I'm not sure that he did, he certainly doesn't seem to have the power to. So something about that whole narrative doesn't, like, it stinks. It doesn't line up, just like the whole narrative around Venezuela didn't line up, which is why I said back in October, I think we might see Maduro get arrested and extracted.
It is. And you know, like I said when we started the show off, you know, you have to facilitate all these operations, but you have to maintain control of the narrative. You have to. It doesn't matter what side. You know, Trump can't just straight out go and do things against the Israeli government, because we have a large population of Christian Zionists that wouldn't understand the actual true geopolitical wars that are unfolding. So what do? You do things, and through proxy, these things populate. You had a lot of the anti-MAGA, anti-Trump people. You know, I call them the pro-jihadi ones, right? Not pro like our neighbors, but the ones that, you know, absolutely are behind like Hamas and things like that. They said, well, Trump is going to put, what's her name that won the Nobel Peace Prize?
Maria Corina Machado.
Yes. He's going to put her into power. And then Trump came out and he dispelled that, said, nah, you don't got respect. No one likes her. So he was a shot. So same
with Rezi Pahlavi. They were like, Rezi Pahlavi, who's the Shah's son of Iran. They were like, they're going to install him. He's the guy. He's out there right now on X calling for everyone to take to the streets and overthrow the government. Rezi Pahlavi's father was installed by the CIA in 1953. This is known. And the reason he was installed was because Mossadegh, who was the president elected in 1951, nationalized the oil and took the oil away from BP. BP owned all the oil in Iran until he took it away. And then the Shah came in, signed the 25-year consortium agreement of 1954. And for 25 years, BP had exclusive rights to all of the oil in Iran. And then in 1978, the Shah said, I'm not renewing that because of what y'all are doing with Israel and the Yom Kippur War. I don't like it. So I'm not going to renew it. And then MI6 said, really? You're not going to renew it? Okay, well, we're going to overthrow you then. And then that was when MI6 released, or the CIA released to the public. They said, hey, everybody, after lighting a movie theater on fire with 500 people inside, they said, dressed as the Shah's like personal security, the Savak, they said, hey, publicly, by the way, the Shah is not even legitimate. We installed him 25 years ago. Here's the proof of that. And they released the documents to the public in Iran in 1978. And that's what got people on the streets demanding a new government.
I'm glad you share that, because it'll help me kind of articulate why I think, to go to your point, you know, you have a lot of people like, yeah, war, right? And, you know, a little bit before we started the show, I kind of shared my position. This kind of explains why I have this position that some people may misinterpret my position. But nonetheless, I'm going to share this real quick with you. I'll run our one commercial for the day, and during that moment, I'll give you a chance to you know, add or supplement or push back against anything I say, and then let everybody know where to find you. I love there were some people in the chat that were like, we're in the ish part.
Yeah, we're way into the ish part. Way into the ish part.
But you know, the point you're making when they said, hey, we're the ones that installed them this many years ago. This is what I'll say. I'm not pro-war. I want everybody to understand that. But I'm not against war. I'm against wars that are for bankers. I'm against wars for the military industrial complex. I'm against wars where we put people into power that are just the puppets of the regime and the globalists and the elite, the cabal, whatever you want to call them. That I'm against. But I do understand that there's an evil that exists in this world, that the only thing that stops that is good men that are willing to be more violent than they are. You know, that's the way that works. And that's why I like how Trump is showing people these things can be accomplished in a matter of a few days or a few hours. And we don't have to have these endless wars, because that's true. Because here's why, and I know a lot of my friends don't agree with me on this one, and you may not either, is we can't just abandon the world theater and say, hey, we're just going to focus on the Western Hemisphere, even though that's what Trump put out in that American strategy. And the reason being is because of what you just said as well. They have implanted these opposition leaders that people think are going to lead I can't hear you, just so you know. Oh, gotcha. They can implant, or if we just abandon these places, a lot of these, and think about it this way, folks. Proud Boys infiltrated by the intelligence agencies. Oath Keepers infiltrated by the intelligence agencies. 3%ers infiltrated by the intelligence agencies. And why do they do this? So that when these organic revolutions unfold, they're not organic, because the leadership in these revolutions are people that have been compromised by the intelligence agencies, by the deep state. And so if we were just to back off Iran and said, hey, they can handle their own thing, they would never survive. And the reason is the deep state has already plugged people into their revolutionary groups so that they end up following people that are controlled anyways. Like in this case, what you're saying about his father.
Interesting point.
Yeah. So what I do think needs to happen is we need to focus on America. We need to focus on the Western Hemisphere. I'm all about that. But whether, and I don't care if it's covertly or overtly, we have to make sure that we're also making sure that when these countries go to take over their own, that it's actually for the first time a legitimate overthrow of a deep state regime. You know, and these people don't stand a chance without our assistance, you know. And I'm not just meaning America, I'm talking about the entire sovereign alliance. And I think we're seeing that. I think that is happening. I'm going to do the last ad, and then after that we'll get your thoughts.
Cool.
Go. So here we go. If you're watching on YouTube, Facebook, or X, you won't see this, so you're gonna have to run over to Rumble, so this way you guys can take a look at it. Here we go. You guys know they can cancel your accounts, freeze your cards, decide what you're allowed to buy, say, or support. Big banks and the financial institutions have total control, and they use it. That's why financial independence matters more now than ever. Introducing Rumble Wallet, a wallet built for freedom. With Rumble Wallet, you control your money, not a bank, not a government, not a tech company. Buy digital assets like Tether, Tether Gold, and Bitcoin in one secure place. No permission, no middleman, no cancel button. And when you want to support the creators you actually believe in, you can use the Rumble Wallet app to directly tip content creators securely, instantly, and without interference. This isn't a credit line they can shut off. It's your wallet permanently. Yours to protect your future, yours to protect your family. When the system fails, when the institutions turn on their own people, financial sovereignty is the difference between security and vulnerability. Rumble Wallet isn't about politics, it's about freedom, ownership, and protecting what's yours. So take control today, download Rumble Wallet now, and step away from the big banks for good. True ownership, true protection, true financial freedom. And why is this so important to me, folks? And I believe if you're watching, it should be that little tip jars right about there, because this is exactly what happened to me under Biden's regime. They went and had Bank of America and some of the other financial institutions I was in give me, you know, anywhere between 14 and 21 days to take my money out. They had things like Uber canceled my account. They showed how much they have control of the financial institutions. Now, thank God, there is a certain bank that I had, because without it, I don't know how the world I would survive. But things like PayPal, Venmo, all these things were taken away from us. And one thing that Rumble has done is not just only giving us a platform where we can say all kinds of stuff. You know, they're not censoring people, but now they're giving us the ability to protect our finances. So you guys, this is something that is important to me. Lots of love for Rumble. Again, if you're watching on one of the other platforms, jump over to Rumble. You'll see it in the live chat, or it'll be in the description after the show. So with that, Ghost, anything you want to add, push back to what I said, and then let everybody know where to find you, man.
No, I think you're right. I think that peace through strength is you have to have the power projection in order to have actual strength. Like people need to be aware that you have the strength. It's also important to have clearly defined objectives, and you know, what is it that we're trying to accomplish whenever we are engaging in kinetic conflict, because that just because there's a problem in the world doesn't mean that a military intervention is going to be the solution. A lot of times it's if you break it, you bought it situation. Like once you break it, like if you don't have a plan for what happens next, then you're just creating a vacuum for, like you said, something worse to come in. And we've seen that. How many times have we seen that happen? And then it's oh, whoops, we didn't mean to do that. So we need to be very aware of that and cognizant of that as we move forward. And we also need to maintain first principles. Like, is this actually in our best interest, in our interest? How is this related to us? Why should we be involved in this and not somebody else, right? So I do think that the Sovereign Alliance is all about building up these other partners around the world that can do this for us, so we don't need to. They can watch their own neighborhood, and that's because that's in their own self-interest. They don't want to live in a world that is a neighborhood that is, you know, broken or in a state of warfare. So I do agree with you that sometimes war and the intervention is necessary. We just have to understand all the dynamics of it before we go in guns blazing. As far as finding me, goes to BPH on X. I'm going to be on a number of Badlands shows coming up in the next couple of days. I'll be on The Narrative tonight with Burning Bright, 9 o'clock Eastern. I'll be on the Book of Trump, which is my show tomorrow night, 7:30 Eastern. I'll be doing the Hugo Chavez. So if you're interested in his history, I've always thought he was a bad guy because that's what I was told, and that's what the narrative is. But the more I dug into it, the more I realized that I think this is like a Putin situation where we were just told he was the bad guy. Was he actually the bad guy? Well, we'll find out. And then I would be on Culture of Change with Ash Epps tomorrow night, 9:00 on Badlands. So.
Right on. And again, if you guys are watching on some of the other platforms, except X doesn't give us a description, but all the other platforms, if you go down the description, the first links you're going to hit is the profile for Ghost, and you're also going to find the Substack for Badlands that's on there to find the work. And I'm telling you guys, if you guys follow Ghost's content, you are going to be weeks, if not months, ahead of everybody else. It's why I love having these conversations with him on Sunday. Also, if you're watching on Rumble, I just dropped a link to my Substack. I just dropped an article which is free, and I think it's one of the most important pieces that I've ever written. So I would tell you guys, please go. It is a long read. It is over 22,000 words, just to put it out there for you guys. But it's going to cover a lot. It's going to be an assessment of a lot of things that have already happened, where we're currently at, and what I anticipate we're going to see over the next 2 to 3 years. So please go and like I said, it's free. Please read that and then share it. And any feedback or questions you guys have from that, let me know, and I'll be doing a supplemental to that. The other thing that I wanted to say is, you guys, I said it when I just 40 seconds ago, but I'm going to repeat it. Follow Ghost. Okay. I'm telling you guys, not just because he's my friend, he's my brother at Badlands, but it's important. There are a lot of people that have conversations surrounding Israel, but they do it in a way that they're trying to push hate. They're trying to push, they want a violent response. They want this kind of rhetoric that puts people against each other. One of the things that I've always respected about the way Ghost does his work is he brings the facts. These are the relationships surrounding the Israeli government. Here's the historical background to it. Here's the actual news of what's unfolding right now. And that is the conversation they don't want people to hear. They want people, and I know some, and I saw it in the chat, people hear the word Israel and they want to tune out because they expect what they hear a lot of these other accounts saying. You're not going to get that if you follow this gentleman over here. And so, Ghost, I just want to say, man, a lot of mad respect for the way you handle and conduct that business. So with that, folks,
Appreciate that.
Good luck to the 49ers. We have a very hard game ahead of us here in about an hour against Philly. And I've been talking trash to CanCon about his Packers getting smoked. So I know he's doing voodoo magic and everything he can on my Niners. So with that, you guys,
good luck.
Good night. God bless. And so you guys remember tonight at midnight Eastern, Q After Hours. I'll see you guys then.
Later, man.